All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Effective Leadership Panel. I'm Nick Gershke, GCU Sports Entertainment Business Club President. If you are interested in joining the Sports Entertainment Business Club, feel free to find me after the meeting. We do a lot of great events like panels, guest speakers, volunteer opportunities, job opportunities. You name it, we can find it. Starting off with our panelist, Jerry Colangelo. We got, oh boy. Yeah, give him a round, give him a round. Marcus Breathway. Christina Huntley. Carrie Pfeffer. And our lovely moderator, Nita Berry. All right, so before we get started, I'm going to kick it to Nathan Peters for prayer, and then we'll get rolling from there.
If you guys don't mind bowing your heads with me. Dear Lord, we just thank you for this opportunity to learn from all these professionals who can just give us wisdom and help us to figure out where we belong in this industry and how we can get there. We thank you for this opportunity, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. How about just a straight up hand for our amazing panel before we even start? So I truly appreciate, I feel so loud, each and every one of you guys taking time out of your busy schedules. I just want to note, I know originally we had Sean Mayo scheduled, and by no means did we get a second rounder because we still got a first rounder with Marcus. But as you guys know, the Cardinals are in transition with their GM and coach. So it's perfect example of how in sports in corporate America we have to pivot at times. And that's what we were able to do literally last night and this morning on the phone with Marcus, and he jumped right in. So thank you for doing that. We genuinely appreciate it. So I want to start by, as you know, our program is effective leadership. And all of you are leaders, you're effective leaders, you have a successful record of leadership. Can you each explain to us a little bit what effective leadership means to you, what that looks like to you?
Leadership is title agnostic. It's something that I get a chance to talk with my kids who are now college graduates and are in a lot of different spots around the country in different jobs. And the expression leadership is title agnostic means that you can be a leader on day one in the way that you approach your work, in the way that people interact with you and you interact with them. It's not about a title. It is about what you do day in and day out to demonstrate that you're all in, that you're paying attention to the details, that you did the homework and the preparation that was necessary to be prepared for the day ahead. All of those things demonstrate leadership. So you might think, oh, Mr. Colangelo, that's obviously a person who's demonstrated leadership, and he certainly has. But I'm telling you that leadership is title agnostic. It's not directly connected to being the CEO, being the chairman. It's about what you bring every day. And one of my daughters is a great example of that because I talked with her about that going in, and she was one of the youngest team members at GoDaddy in the communications portion of that business. Yet early on, they were asking her opinion about things. They were having her sit in on meetings, not because she had a high title, because she didn't, but because she demonstrated her value within that world. That is an opportunity open to all of you. So I want you to try to remember that. You're going to hear a lot of great things from everybody here today, but I just want you to realize that it's not about the title. It's about what you bring to work every single day.
I always like to answer this question because I'm able to go back to the moment that I was sitting in your chair and not realizing at that time how much of a leader I was becoming because I was sitting in that chair. So I commend all of you, first of all, for being here because that shows to me leadership within yourselves and within your community here at GCU. It may not feel like it right now, but to me, leadership really does start where you are, whether that's game night interning with the Suns like I did a million years ago, or working for someone like Nita as an intern at the Mercury, again, a million years ago. Taking those opportunities, even though they may feel very small scale in the very large scale of professional sports or corporate America, that's where your leadership starts to grow and shine. So don't take for granted that just because you're beginning or because you're still in school that you're not becoming the leader you're going to be tomorrow. And I agree with Carrie that showing up every day, having the integrity to do the job, having the character to stick to it when it gets tough, that in yourself is building you as a leader, but it's showing the people around you how much integrity you have to lead the way for them, whether it be a class or a dorm or a team, whatever it is. You know, in our world of sports, it's all about teamwork. We can't do what we do without the team with us and around us. So, and I think on my day-to-day as an athletic director, it's being in the trenches with my people and with my students. I don't care that I'm the athletic director. If I need to go clean a bathroom, I will. If I need to schlep a table, I will. You know, if I need to make sure that some of our students with food insecurities or with money problems at home need help outside of what we can provide at the college, that to me is showing up for them and being a leader for them, but also being in the trenches with my team and with my coaches to be able to support our students in that way. So really it's showing up, doing what you're going to say you're going to do, and again, showing up today is just the start of it for you guys.
Everyone, excuse me. First of all, thank you for Anita for the invite. I'm about 8 years removed from school, so I'm sure I would have been one of the students sitting in here, just trying to soak up some education, soak up some knowledge from industry professionals. So, huge kudos, and I'll echo, both Gary and Christina's comments. For me, effective leadership is really being clear on what your principles are. All right, so it'll come with time and experience, but be clear on what are the things that are important to you that you can hold folks accountable to. Because one of the things I learned is you're very much in that, from a leadership perspective, you're very much in that coaching sort of like position where you're not going to get on the court and dribble the ball and try to shoot it, but you need firm principles that the players, so to speak, your team members, your staff, et cetera, that can inform their decision making. Because what I learned is, folks that work for me, they'll be out and about, they'll have to make decisions, and I'm not going to be there to necessarily guide it. But so for me, what's going to be that thing that's going to guide their decision making? And it's me being very crystal clear on what are my principles and being able to effectively communicate that to the team. All right, so that for me, that leadership is really being very clear about what are your core principles. The sooner you can get there, the sooner you can drive results, you can hold folks accountable, and really deliver sort of a standard of excellence.
First of all, there was something said here that the two gals up here worked for the Suns and Mercury a million years ago or something. That makes me very old. It's also very interesting to hear different people speak on the subject, any subject, but this particular subject of leadership, because you can talk all day and all night about it. Some people say, are you born a leader? Can you become a leader? Et cetera, et cetera. And it's all of the above. My own opinion in terms of leadership is being willing to take on any task given to you, be the very best at how you do it, and be an example. And who you are and how you do it is really seen by the people that are around you. So in my particular case, I've had opportunities I was asked to lead quite often. Different teams, captaincies, and things like that. I didn't seek any of them. They sought me. Now, I guess what I'm saying to you is every one of you have the capacity to be a leader. You do. You can't read a book, in my opinion, and learn all the ABCs about how you become a leader. Take a look at people you respect who are leaders. Be a sponge. Learn from them. Learn from them because they have something going for themselves and they've established themselves as so-called leaders. You may achieve that goal. You may not even care to achieve that goal. I think what's really important is that in everything you do, give it your best. And some of you will rise to a level where you're considered a leader, and others maybe fall a little bit short, but you're going to be a better person for that experience.
That's great. Jerry, I want to direct this one directly to you. With leadership, one of the things I learned later in my career that with leadership comes tough conversations. And one of the things that I think is a true sign of a great leader is they're not afraid to have tough conversations. You've certainly had to have your share in your career. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. One other thing I would say, along with tough conversations, is you can't be afraid to fail. You know, not everything is peaches and cream. Not everything is going to be easy. But be willing to take on tough challenges. And if you're successful, you're really achieving quite a bit in terms of being accepted as a leader. That's a byproduct. Also, you have to be willing to face these tough decisions, and many of them, in my opinion, were in the sports world is firing a coach or replacing a player. You know, I had a very, I played, I scouted, I coached, I managed, I've done all those things in sports. The toughest thing is telling a player he's finished, or he's going on waivers, or there's a trade that's been made, and because I took it very personally. Heck, as a young guy, I got traded, so I understood how it felt, and that was in a semi-pro league. So, yeah, you have to be willing to stand up, be held accountable, be willing to make the tough decisions, and live with the results.
That's great. So looking at that same question from a different standpoint, Carrie, of how important communication and effective communication skills are for a leader, right? So if I'm sending a message but my body language is giving you a different message, they don't align, I'm not authentic. Can you expand on that, please?
You bet. The thing that you carry with you at every moment of every single day is actually a great tool to help you with how others see you when you communicate. That's your phone. Because it's got a camera, a video camera in there. If you ever want to figure out how to do a better presentation, if you ever want to see what someone else sees when they're talking to you, or get a chance to understand a bit about what it's like when you have to deliver an important message, practice it. Go through in your mind what it is you want, but also say it out loud. Because your ability to actually hear those words, put them together well, and figure out how that message is going to most appropriately be delivered is a really important part of any leader's job. So actually practicing that, especially early in your career, can be hugely advantageous. So I always say the camera is the best teaching tool there is. I spent 20 years as a news reporter, so I've already made every single possible mistake you can make with a camera pointed at you, and many of those years are before YouTube, so you can't find them is what I'm saying. You can't look it up. You can't. But it's that experience that taught me that anytime you're prepping for a very serious conversation or a presentation or something that really means something to you, making sure that you practice and take it seriously, and maybe even use your phone to record it and play it back is a great way to make sure that you're on point.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I would second that too. So on my drive, like to or from work, whenever I have some kind of important meeting or presentation, I'll take out voice notes and I'll present it, and you listen to it and you hear, how can I clean it up? How can I be more efficient in communicating that thought? How can I be more concise? It seems silly when you start doing it, but you make it a practice and a habit, you become way, way more effective at your communication skills. And when you're presenting to a team, wanting to get them on board for, whatever the cause is, whatever the initiative is, if you can be really effective at communicating that, it makes all the difference. If you're, in a budget meeting and you're asking for money, you have to be very clear and concise as far as, here's what I'm asking for, here's the why, here's the data behind it, here's why I think this is the right decision moving forward. So I 100% second that. Like, I have a crap load of voice notes on my phone that I hope no one ever finds it and hear any of it, because a lot of it is unfinished thoughts and ideas, and if things come to mind, I quickly grab a phone out, record it, because while it's top of mind, while you're thinking about it, in the next 5 minutes, you'll get a text or you get a call about something else, and all of a sudden that great thought, it just went out the window. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. So I'm a huge fan of that.
So first of all, Christina, I wasn't there a million years ago. They might have all been, but I'm in a different class. So one of the things, just so you guys know, a little fun fact, Christina was my intern when I was with the Mercury. So that's how far back we go. And it's amazing to watch her and how she's evolved. Mike just went, oh, there we go. Okay. So one of the things that you and I have talked about over the years is that everyone in your path offers you a nugget, right, of some sort. And you kind of add to that toolbox along the way. Sometimes those nuggets are nuggets you keep that you go, I never want to pull out that nugget because that's how I don't want to be, right? So that's just as important. Can you talk a little bit about some of those nuggets along the way, all of you, that you've kind of taken?
Yeah, I'll start with a nugget that I will never want to pull out. I've been laid off a couple times in my career. And one of those times was with a boss that, again, he is in my toolbox forever as what not to do and how not to treat people. And in that moment, it was devastating. My livelihood got taken away from me. I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought my years in sports was over, and it was very early on in my career. But being able to take that with me along the way, and again, this took me a couple jobs and a couple years to work through this and know this now, but to be able to take that experience with me and build from that to be the person I wanted to be the leader I wanted to be, that in and of itself was invaluable, even though it was a really awful experience right in the moment. So I start with that because a lot of times, especially in the wild world of sports where everything's moving forward so quickly, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of glamour, a lot of people think. But I think those experiences, for those of you in sports and even in corporate America, same thing, taking those bad moments and being able to parlay that into the strength and the fortitude and the grit to stay with what you're doing, I think is super important. The other part, Nita, I think that's interesting is all of the people that you meet along the way. You never know how those people are going to influence your life and where you may cross paths again. I worked for Jerry 25 years ago. Never 25 years ago would have I thought 25 years from now I'd be sitting on the same stage on the same panel with Mr. Colangelo, the big boss, when I was at the Suns as an intern. So being able to meet people along the way, and everybody always focuses on networking, and that's kind of, to me, a catchword. Oh, you have to network, you have to get to know people, you have to meet people, and all of that is very true. But those connections that you're able to make and those authentic conversations that you're able to have with people is super important, and you just have to tuck that away because you never know when you're going to pull on that in the darkest moments of your life, in the, the shiny, bright moments of your life, or where you're going to be able to apply that. I could apply something that I learned at the Suns and used it for the Anti-Defamation League when I worked in nonprofit world. So you never know what you're going to be able to use, and that toolbox is invaluable every step of the way along your careers and just in your life to make yourself a better person.
I think what you've heard are some great tools, and absorb some of the things you just heard. You know, these are things that people really didn't talk about as we were growing up because there wasn't anyone to tell us anything. We were kind of creating as we went along. One of the things we understood is be a good communicator, be able to communicate with people, look them in the eye, shake hands, develop that personal one-on-one kind of a thing. And guess what happens usually? There's a trust that develops, and that goes a long way. And when you create that kind of a foundation for yourself, you're going to be asked to do a lot of things. And that is a description of being called a leader, or people are expecting a lot from you. But I'm really impressed by some of the tools that were discussed here. They're very applicable for all of you. It really is.
So I got a couple, maybe I'll share three. So one, let the work kind of be the prayer, right? So less about, you know, yeah, you want to have your goals and what you want to hit, but make it about the work and less about the results, and get better at just being excellent. And the folks that need to see, folks are going to be looking at, right? And so the people that need to see that will see it. So let the work sort of be the prayer for you. Your network is kind of everything, right? Did our TV production in school. When I got out of school, I didn't necessarily go apply for a job and fill out an application and send my resume. It was, hey, we're doing a show in LA. We need someone to do such and such job. Are you available? And, to get that call, it's someone knowing what my work ethic is and being able to trust that, hey, we have a job and you're the guy for it. At the time, I wasn't necessarily really thinking about it that way, but it was really about the work. And if you're going to vouch for me, I don't want to disappoint, you, but also my own character, right? I want to be able to stand on that. So I think your network, let the work sort of be the prayer. Your character is everything. The work you can teach. When we're hiring now at the stadium, it's really about people that I feel are the right character and a good fit, because that's the thing you can't really teach. The work and how to do it, and here's how you set up and you tear down and you get things done. That's all stuff that I can teach someone. Who you are as a person, I'm more interested in that. Am I going to be able to work with you? Are we going to get along? Are you going to get along with the team? Are you a good fit for the team? So those are the three that I'll share that has been helpful for me in guiding how I navigate the professional journey.
Two quick things. First nugget, fewer sentences that begin with the word I. If you find yourself beginning sentences, whether it's in a text message, an email, or your conversation with the word I on a regular basis, people are going to want to spend less time with you. So just kind of keep that as a watchword for what it is that how it is that you go about your business, and I think that's reflective of some of what you've heard. The other thing I'm going to share is a quick story that has a connection here. I worked as a news reporter and a news anchor for 20 plus years here and in Los Angeles, and one day I was called into the general manager's office for the first time in my career and told they weren't going to continue my contract. And the next day, I was playing in a charity golf tournament. I had another 3 or 4 weeks of work to do, but at the end of that time, I was out of work. So I go to this charity golf tournament, and I'm walking up to the practice area, and this little guy is walking towards me kind of with a focus, and he says, "Kerry Pfeffer, Channel 5, I know you. You do a great job." It was Cotton Fitzsimmons. I'd never met Cotton Fitzsimmons. Cotton was twice coach of the Suns. Is that correct? Plus, he was part of the broadcasting. He just wore a number of different hats within the organization. I'd never met him before. And here he is walking up to me and telling me without any prompting that he really appreciated what I did and that he and his wife would watch our 10 o'clock newscast and all that sort of thing. And I said, well, I really appreciate that, and I want to tell you something. I'm not going to be doing the news for very much longer. They just told me yesterday I'm done there. He didn't blink. He goes, "You're going to be fine. It's just like in sports. Sometimes they don't know what the hell to do, so they fire the coach."
I'll say something about Cotton Fitzsimmons. One of the most positive people that I've ever met in my life was Cotton Fitzsimmons. He passed away way too young. He was 72, and that's, I'm going to say 10 years ago maybe now,
Yep.
or a little
Yep.
bit more.
Yep.
And his wife, everyone was concerned about his wife and how she was dealing with the loss of Cotton, because he affected everyone he ever met, just like that. I mean, he was that kind of a caring person. So what she was being told is, "Joanne, just focus on the good days you had with Cotton." And her response was, "We never had a bad one." That said a lot.
Yeah. Let me just, because there's a connection. So that was the only time I ever met Cotton Fitzsimmons, but he assured me that I was going to be just fine. And a couple of years later, he passed away.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, a couple of years later, I was fine. I'd started my own company. I was doing this work, and it meant so much to me that I went to his funeral and told his wife how much that meant to me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, both of you. So, which brings up something in every business, in every company, there are processes, there are rules, there's ways we do things, right? I learned in my career that while there are processes, you put people first. Would you say people or processes? What would you say and why?
I'd say people all day long. It's not about processes. If you have good people and everyone's on target, whatever the subject may be, I wouldn't worry about how you get to the finish line. You'll get there because you have the people there who will help get you there.
I kind of have a different perspective on, I'm more process driven, and there's a lot of empathy that goes into it. So it's not from the standpoint of not necessarily caring about people, from a humanity perspective, but more from the business operational standpoint. I think I'm leaning towards having clear, defined process so that whomever kind of steps into those roles, it's not dependent on people. Right, because I've been in situations before where, it's Greg that needed to do the job, and there's no defined process for how we get from A to B, and it's always been Greg doing it. Well, when Greg decides to, hey, there's a new opportunity I'm interested in, and Greg kind of walks out the door, we're like, oh crap, like now who's going to do the job, right? Because we haven't, and we, from a leadership standpoint, ultimately it was on my shoulder to not put our organization in a place where we're so dependent on this individual doing that specific job. Rather, let's establish clear, defined process for how we get it, whatever the job is, get it done, but still give Greg, and Greg can be, whomever, still give that team member an opportunity to bring themselves to that role, right? But if ever they leave that role, we're not screwed, for lack of a better word. But I'm all for people bringing themselves to work because, you know, I'm from South America, from Guyana, right? I bring my own kind of perspective to my role and everything that I see. And for someone that's from someplace else, I have a huge appreciation for, we're just different people, so we see the same thing. I say blue, you know, you'll think about maybe navy blue, or someone will think about sky blue, and that's kind of that diversity of perspective that I think we get by really embracing people. But from an operations standpoint, I think I'm way more process-driven. Sorry, Mr. Colangelo.
No, you know what? You raise a very, very good point. I'm not disagreeing with that, but my personal experience has been, I'm going to bet on the people. I'm a people person, and we'll get the job done. I'm not too interested in the process, but that's my personal opinion. You know, it depends what business you're talking about.
That's true. That's true. And I guess I'm somewhere in the middle where I want to embrace the people and you know, that unique quality that as diverse human beings we bring, but also have processes to inform how we operate. So,
You know, I think I'm going to have to split hairs here, and I am going to answer the question, so stick with me. I think that process lays the foundation for how you do business. And I think that's extremely important, especially with my job working in compliance with the NJCAA. It's very process-driven. But I think my feeling for people, and especially my students, takes over to figure out how do we make that process work for us? How do we fit in that very tight box at times for, let's say, a student-athlete's eligibility? How do I get Susie to that point? I work in a district of 10 colleges at the community colleges here in Maricopa County, and our system is one that has, you know, 10 cooks in the kitchen, if you will. So the people part of it for me, especially as a leader when I'm working with other people in either in my department or in our district with 8 other ADs, figuring out how the process can work for us. And I'm not saying break the rules, but I am saying there are times when our system does not work well for us as professionals or for our students. It's not student driven, and it means to be. There's no malintent there by the district, please don't get me wrong, but sometimes the boots on the ground just have a better understanding of how that's going to work in the day-to-day. So being able to build those relationships with my colleagues and with my students, and putting the person first to figure out how we can make a process work for that individual, I think is the overriding thing for me, is how does this work for each student? Because even if it's you need to have a 2.0 GPA with 24 credits to be able to be a sophomore at my college and play baseball. Each of those sophomores is going to have a different story, a different path, a different intent, and a different end game. So I need to figure out how that very small box fits for 45 individuals on my team. So I would say people first, and then figure out how those processes can work for those individuals.
The only little slice of this that I would add is that your ability to communicate, whatever the process is going to be the key to a lot of the success. And a lot of times it has to do with context. People are like, what? Why is this rule? And this is, why are we, you know, you can feel the anxiety, the angst, the anger about something, about the procedure, the process, whatever. A lot of times what's missing is context. I get it, it's a pain in the neck to have to be here at 7 a.m., but here's the sequence of events that then happens in order for us to open the doors and have the fans show up here at 9:30 or whatever the sequence is. Being able to provide that context and communicate it effectively gets many more people on board in the way that you need to as a leader. So there's a set of rules. Many times you have to give the context for those rules in order to get the buy-in that you need.
So when we look at the business landscape over the last 5 years, 10 years, last 2 years, it has evolved, and it continues to evolve. What a lot of people call buzzwords like DEI, inclusivity, I say has always been a part of effective leadership. thinking back to when I made the move as an intern from the Warriors as a coordinator to a director of communications with the Suns and the Mercury under the leadership of Mr. Colangelo, the reality was the mentor that I was going was a woman, Julie Fye, in an executive position. That was normal. It was diverse. All of us did not look alike. We all came from different backgrounds, and I feel that you built that with a lot of intention. It wasn't about checking the box. It was creating an atmosphere that regardless of the color of my skin, my gender, I fit in and I contributed what I brought to the table. Can you guys talk about how that's evolved and how important that is in every single setting?
So, as you can see, as I teased with Nita, one of these things is not like the other on this stage. And when I say that, I'm referring to gender. I've been in this business a very long time. 25 years ago doesn't seem like that long ago to me. I know it seems like your entire lives, because it probably is. But 25 years ago, there were not a lot of women in sports. Frankly, there are still not a lot of women in sports. There are a heck of a lot more in sports now than there were 25 years ago, but there's still work to do. And that goes for the DEI work that, like Nita said, is more of a buzzword today. And it's very important work, but it has been there forever. And people like Mr. Colangelo have built teams around him that reflect talent and reflect skill, reflect what you can bring to the table no matter what those people look like. I think that the sports world and the corporate world have become a long way in even the last 5 years of being more diverse. And when I say diverse, I don't mean just gender or ethnicity. I mean diversity in thinking, diversity in education, diversity in experience. You may have a master's degree and no world experience, and you may have 20 years of world experience, and those two people can be equals. You know, I think and college education is extremely important, don't get me wrong, it's what I do every day. But I think that diversity of talent and that diversity of thinking and not having a room of yes people, yes men or women, is extremely invaluable. And you guys have that here at GCU with your classes and with the makeup of your student body. And I think it's ever more important every day in the working world, no matter what that industry is, to be able to build that. But the strides that we have made specifically in sports for women to have experiences and for possibly people without education and with real world experience to have experiences in the world has come a long way. But as you guys, I see your faces in this room, you guys are the next generation of that world, and hopefully making it more inclusive on every level, every gender, every representation that's possible. And I think that that's very important. It's not just students from GCU that are going to be, you know, I'm an ASU alum, I'm sorry, but go Devils. You know, it's not just students from...
Can you cut her mic off, please?
And I think that diversity of talent and diversity of experience is extremely important. So I say all of that to say don't pigeonhole yourselves just to GCU even. Don't pigeonhole yourself just to basketball like I did when I first got into the industry. Don't do that to yourselves, because with that talent, you're going to be able to jump ship and go somewhere else and help diversify the next generation of our entire industry.
The thing that I always ask clients that I'm working with is, who are your customers? Do you look like your customers? And if you don't, that's probably going to be a problem, because the connection and understanding of the people who are the fans, who are the customers, who are buying your product, whatever that product might be, you need to really understand them. And how can it possibly be that you understand them if the decision makers who sit around the table ultimately don't have that same connection? It doesn't mean it has to be every single element of that, but you better be making some efforts along those lines. When people say that China and India will absolutely overtake the United States as far as an economic power is concerned, the one thing I always point out is I think there's more of a genuine effort to diversify the decision-making process in corporate America than will ever happen culturally in India or China. which means that companies here will better know their customer because they'll more reflect the customer than companies necessarily will in China and India. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We may know in your lifetime, but that's my bet. The more we diversify the decision-making process in this country, we actually put ourselves ahead, in my view.
I mean, for me, I'm not directly in the DEI space, so, I'll speak to it from some degree like a leadership perspective. I think it's myself holding me accountable to be very purposeful and intentional about the decisions I make. And it's pausing it and evaluating and being introspective and asking why I'm making those decisions, because I'm sure you guys heard of unconscious bias. So a lot of times it's just kind of reinforcing the same. So, an example would be, resumes coming across my desk for folks that are looking to kind of break into sports and live entertainment. Traditionally, you look for this criteria, and if they meet that criteria, they go here. If they don't, they go there. And you got to imagine, you're right at that point, the diversity you're kind of throwing out the window, right? Because you're just grabbing more of the same and contributing to nothing different. It's like, yeah, they have the academics and maybe they have some of the experience, but when it comes to creativeness, I went to school for TV production, and now I'm in the sports and entertainment space, and fortunately I was able to find a space that marry what I did academically to what I'm doing now. But it's myself as a leader being open-minded enough to not look at a resume and look for these keywords, but it's, hey, how are you different? Like let's meet each other and figure out the things that individual brings to the table that can have us think differently about what we do. It's easier said than done. It's a lot easier to just default to what you know from an organizational standpoint will be acceptable, right? But it's if you're ever in that leadership position, it's making that extra effort and being intentional about wanting diversity. It's about, I office out of the State Farm Stadium. It's me inviting people that may be interested in this space to come see it, right? Because frankly, unless you get invited in to be a part of it, you're not really applying for a job and just kind of getting it. It's a little more complicated than that. So it's me being intentional about how do I offer opportunities to people that won't traditionally have an opportunity. They don't know anyone. They're not calling me directly and saying, hey, I know someone that's looking for a job and I can call them in. It's very complicated. I don't have a very clear-cut, definitive answer, but I can say personally, I'm consistently trying to work on being open-minded and hopefully lend to the diversity and inclusion.
Well, again, you hear some very interesting perspectives here, and they're all important. But I'll just say this. We are, each and every one of us are a product of our experiences. So if you, depending on when you came along on your journey, and you're learning things about an industry by way of example, in my particular case, it was the beginning of sports, really, truly, back in the late 60s, when there were only a handful of teams in each sport. And there weren't any true organizations. I remember a conversation when I was part of the startup of the Chicago Bulls in '66. We were the 10th team in the NBA. The cost of the franchise in Chicago was $1,250,000. The payroll for 12 players was $180,000. Ticket prices were $2, $3, $4 a piece. I remember calling the other 9 teams because we had 5 people in the front office, and I was the number 2 person at 26. And I'm calling people, introducing myself, asking questions. And I remember calling the general manager of the Detroit Pistons, and I said, his name was Ed Coyle. I said, Ed, how many season tickets did you have this past year? He said, 96. 96. I mean, that always stood in my mind. That talk about a mom and pop league. So everything that was happening was something being done for the first time. And you learn by experience, you learn in the trenches. You don't have a lot of time to follow protocol, because there wasn't any. You just made your mistakes and you learned from your mistakes, and slowly everything started to come along, and people who were pretty organized started to get involved in sports and became more sophisticated. So my way of saying things is that it was a mom and pop league and leagues back then, and today it's a very sophisticated multi-billion-dollar industry. And so there's room for all kinds of development. Certainly the diversity that's taken place in the last 20 years is, I think, terrific. I also agree it's not over. There is room for so much more. In particular, the women who that I've been involved with, that work for me, with me, they've done pretty well for themselves, but there should be more getting those opportunities. So if any of you, I'm looking at the ladies here, if that's your goal, that's your objective, go for it. Don't let anything stand in your way. And so if you're hungry enough, you get in front of the right people, all you're looking for is a shot. You just want an opportunity. Get your foot in the door. And then as far as the guys who are here, that certainly is applicable also. Because the one thing about America, the greatest country in the world, is that it doesn't matter what part of town you're from, what your economic background is. If you have some ability and you believe in yourself and you're hungry enough and you're going to work harder than the next person, you have a chance to be successful. I've seen it over and over again. So I just encourage all of you, if you have a dream, and you should have a dream exactly about what you would like to do, what you'd like to become, go for it. And don't let anyone stand in your way.
Marcus, I just want to say that the example you shared was putting people before processes, for the record, okay?
He's young. He'll learn.
That's fair.
Fair. So what is a bit of advice that you would give them in the form of you wish someone would have given you and your younger self when you were trying to break through whatever industry or early on in your career?
I'll kick it off. Not so much what I wish someone had told me, but my advice would be, right now you guys have ideas of like what you want to become and what you want to do career-wise. I want to be in maybe football, basketball, work in front office, et cetera, et cetera. I would say don't put blinders on that career journey and just be so steadfast on what you think it is that you want to do. Because the reality is you haven't really done the job yet, and at this point you may be excited about what you think the job entails rather than what it actually takes. Right, I work in sports with the Cardinals, and we do live entertainment at State Farm Stadium. And from a leadership perspective, there's the people, there's the guest experience, and there's the business side of it. Right. So, one, it's where do you think you fit into that space? Because it's not. If you're not working in it, you get to come into the stadium when hey guys, are we ready? Are we sure ready? Good? Everything is cleared, ready to go. We open doors and you see that experience. You're not really seeing the full cycle of it. So I would say don't put blinders on. in terms of a career choice. Have a goal where you want to go, where you want to get to, but be open to opportunities that may come along. All right, and I say that I was sharing earlier from New York. I have friends that are still there, that are still chasing the dream in wanting to be in like TV and production. And it's, you know, hey man, we're in our 30s now. Like, we gotta do something else or pivot, right? But they're so focused. They put blinders on, and they're so focused on I want to be X. You know, and thankfully, you know, I didn't take that route where if you'd asked me, I was going to be a TV producer. You couldn't tell me any different, right? And I'm so glad that I had that focus, but at the same time, when opportunities came left and right, I wasn't afraid to say, hey man, you think I'll be good at this? Great, let me give it a shot. Because it's usually people with experience that can see you as an individual and see certain character and certain traits to say, hey, I think you got something in this. Why don't you give it a shot? And you haven't been there yet. So really you have zero data that's informing whether or not you say yes or no. So give it a shot. Like, you have tons of life ahead of you. And I'm saying that from someone that's been almost a decade removed from school. You know, you have tons of life ahead of you. Take shots, particularly when you're young, you don't have a family yet. Feel free to pack a bag and move to wherever the opportunity is. Because once you get grounded in a family and that sort of stuff come into play, it's a little bit harder to pack a bag and tell the wife, hey, I'm going to be gone for whatever period of time. So say that all to say, don't put blinders on that career journey. Just be open to opportunities that come your way, and feel free to pivot left and right along that path.
The one thing that I wish I would have heard a little bit more when I was in your shoes is the importance of the transferability of your skills. What I didn't realize, I was very focused on, as Marcus was saying, very focused. I was going to be a television news reporter, a news anchor, and I was lucky enough to be able to do some of that stuff. But what never occurred to me is how the skills that I was learning while doing that job 20 years ago transferred exactly into the business world of understanding how to write, how to speak, how to succinctly deliver a message, how to get along with a diverse group of people, how to set a goal and actually try to achieve it. All of those things were really important in that early part, but it was absolutely transferable in anything else you do. So the job that you may not love right now, that you have, that may not pay you enough and you wish you were doing something else, there are skills that you're picking up in that job that will be absolutely transferable to the next one and to the next. And I didn't ever put all of that together until many years later, but it really does make a difference. Realize that all of the things that you're learning, even at a job that you don't particularly like, for a boss that you don't particularly like, actually there's stuff there that you're picking up that will be very valuable. And Christina made a similar point earlier about a bad boss isn't necessarily all bad because you know what you don't want to do when you're in charge.
I think more so than what I wish somebody had told me, because I was very fortunate to have strong mentors who guided me along the way, was I wish I had listened to them more. And when I say that, what I mean is I know sitting where you are, for me personally, the self-doubt and the lack of self-confidence was sometimes immeasurable. And sometimes it was very difficult for me to get out of my shell to take the shot and take those opportunities. I had people like Nita around me saying, you can do this, this is your next thing, this is what you need to do, I'll help you get there. I wish I had listened to that more, and I wish I had had the confidence within myself to listen to that more at an earlier stage in my career, because that is something that I've really learned to internalize and not say, not be opposed to a compliment. Take it for what the people wouldn't say it if they didn't mean it. And please believe them when they're giving you their confidence in you. You need to then transcribe that in your own brain to your own self-confidence and your own grit and fortitude to stick with what you're doing. And I wish I had had that mechanism, that skill set earlier on in my career. So if it's anything I can impart to you guys just getting started, take those words to heart. Find those people that can encourage you and build you up, because those are the people that are going to be able to catapult you to the next big thing in your careers and in your life.
I'm just going to add one thing that I think is important, and that is your first job is only your first job. And during your journey, you may end up with 7 to 10 jobs before you finally land exactly where you're really comfortable and the opportunity presents itself. So on one hand, be hungry, but also be patient and learn. You know, the more you learn, the more you create these relationships, the more you develop the ability to converse and communicate. It's going to prepare you for the next step and the next step. And some people hit it early, and some it takes a long time. But don't ever be discouraged. You know, your background in terms of what you're getting here at school is helping prepare you in every possible way for the rest of your life. And I know it gets a little bit anxious in terms of what am I going to do? You know, what job am I going to get? Well, everyone goes through that. You know, I had the same experience coming out of college, although I was already married, coming out of college with a child. So a little bit more pressure, you know, to take care of business. But I chose, it was really interesting. Could have had a coaching, teaching job, which I thought, yeah, that's interesting. And I felt I could be okay in that field. Management training for major corporations, I wasn't sure. And then there was an opportunity to go back to my old neighborhood and be in business with a buddy of mine and play basketball 3 times a week and get paid for doing it. And I took the easy way, and I did that, okay, for 3 years. And after 3 years, I had nothing to show for it. Really, not much. But then I met someone who had a dream. He had the dream, and that was to bring pro basketball to Chicago. He knew me by name or recognition of my name in sports, and he wanted me to be a part of that. So, some people would say, well, you got a break. You know, you got a break. Right time, right place, blah, blah, blah. No, my attitude was God had a plan for my life. I had nothing to say about it. And everything that's happened in my life, which is a lot, was his plan, not mine. And so keep your focus on your faith. Do what you need to do, and you know deep down inside what you need to do. And let it ride and see what happens. It's an exciting time for you. Think about it. To get out there and experience all, you know, it goes by so quickly. Trust me, it really does. And so make the most of it.
It does go by fast. Let's open it up for some questions. If I can either hand someone my mic if we have any questions.
Thank you. Kind of provided some solace already, but one of the things I've been struggling with personally and a lot of people is having anxiety with all the opportunity that's presented to me on where I should go and where I should pursue. And I was just going to ask all of you, what were some impetuses on your pursuits, and what helped you maintain your steadfastness into your career to where you are today?
I'll say this. Believe in yourself, number one. Don't doubt yourself. Go into something with your eyes open. Try to measure it as best you can. And don't be afraid to fail. I will tell you, most any successful person that I've ever met, including myself, I've learned more from all the failures, not the successes. And so that's part of life. So don't be overly anxious. You know, you're dealing with the anxiety thing, especially I could tell with your leg pounding up and down and so forth. Take it easy, relax. You'll be just fine. Okay? Just believe that, and you will.
You know, to kind of echo Ms. Colangelo's comment, that anxiety might be coming from, hey, I need to make the right decision, right? And trying to be risk averse. But one, there's no way around that, right? There's just life, there's factors around us that you and I don't control. So I'd say be less worried about that. Don't be afraid to fail, but do the thing that feels less like work, right? Because then your day-to-day doesn't feel like work. You're just, I mean, for me, it feels like robbery, like I'm getting paid to do what I'm doing, right? I really don't work, you know, and I truly mean that, not to sound cliche, but it really doesn't feel like work what I'm doing, and I get compensated for it. So do the thing that feels true, that doesn't feel like work, and you have a lot of life, man. Like if it doesn't work out, you got an education, so at minimum you'll be able to get a job, right? So, and with that, you don't worry about getting a job. Do the thing that feels true, and if it doesn't work out, it's just data to know, like, okay, this is the thing that I don't like doing, and then that compounds, right? So if you fail after failure after failure, it's rather than perspective-wise, rather than framing it as a failure, it's just learning. Right? It's just learning, and it's just data you're absorbing. So, yeah, you got an education, you'll be just fine. Do the thing that feels true to you, and like Mr. Colangelo said, just don't be afraid to fail.
So you guys have mentioned a lot, like don't be afraid to fail. I guess what's an example in maybe your lives, your guys' career, or what advice can you give of how do you persevere when you do fail? I guess, like, what advice can you give when you do fail, or when you do, fail? What advice can you give to get up from that and to learn from that and to continue going?
I think for me, it's you got to own it. That's the first thing. I'm big on accountability in my own life and my students' lives. So I think you've got to own it, and you've got to be, you might not be okay with it in the moment, but you got to own it that you made the mistake, or you were learning the lessons along the way, or whatever that is. And then I think you gotta put your nose to the grindstone and figure out what's the pivot from here. What am I going to do with that? Am I going to stick with this specific job, or am I going to make a jump to something else that's going to fit me better or that I like better? Is to figure out kind of a journey or a path out of that. And that could be in the same position, you know, the very next day. You just have to, you gotta own it, and then you gotta figure out, okay, what am I gonna do with this information that I just learned? Because again, it can be invaluable, like Marcus said, you're learning along the way. And I think failure has a very, very negative connotation, and I don't think it always should, because I think there is learning in that. And so you just have to figure out how to pivot and what you're gonna do next, and use what you just learned, because you're gonna be able to use that as much as you're gonna be able to use all the good things that have happened to you.
Just one quick caveat to that process of failure. If you find yourself continually telling your friends that, man, the last place I was, it was a bunch of jerks. And then the place before that I worked, there was a bunch of jerks there. And then after a while, you have to realize, maybe you're the jerk. But understanding that a failure actually can be that thing that propels you in a different direction. After 20 plus years in broadcasting, I wasn't in broadcasting anymore as my full-time job, but what I ended up doing, I liked just as much, maybe even more, and it opened up a whole other chapter for my life. So having those experiences there are a few people, and Mr. Colangelo already said, you know, that you'll learn more from those challenging times than you do in other circumstances. And the best thing for you to do is to be able to explain that, because it shows up on your resume, or somebody asks you, how come you're not working so-and-so? Be able to explain it. Be able to, not in a way that bends the truth in any way, but be able to talk about what it is that happened, what you learned, what the circumstances were, and how you're trying to build on that.
I'm Marshall, a sophomore finance student. I just have a question because ultimately the goal is to be a charismatic leader, an effective charismatic leader. Throughout your long professional lives, my question would be is what is one characteristic of a charismatic leader you have found in your professional career?
Don't you love his energy, first
I'm
of all?
going to say, well, first of all, the word I came to mind was presence. You already have that. Seriously. So, feel good about yourself, confident about yourself, and some of the things that you've heard over, some of us have referred to as being able to communicate and talk. And so if you have the presence and the ability to communicate, that'll take you a long way. Just that. You don't even have to know very much. You will eventually.
Yeah. One quick one that I wanted to say that often gets overlooked is a sense of humor. A sense of humor oftentimes is a sign that somebody is a good listener, a good observer, and is smart. And being able to demonstrate that through a sense of humor, people appreciate that so much. They appreciate that in a coworker. If that's something that you can call upon, it's a really valuable tool.
I mean, I would add to that a word that I learned a couple of years ago, executive presence, and I've read a couple of books on it. It's one of those things like, you stood up and, okay, clearly something stood out. It's that executive presence. And I don't know who you are, I don't know your resume, but you kind of stood out. So it's that executive presence, I think, makes, it kind of gets you in the room with zero credentials, right? Two, just be open to share, who you are. I mean, at the end of the day, titles removed and accomplishments removed, we're all like human beings, right? So we all have stuff that we come with, right? And stuff that's relatable. So while, one person may be in this position, accomplished or not, at the end of the day, we're all human beings. So there's things that you might be dealing with that I'm likely dealing with, and we can relate on that level. And once you hit that with people and you can kind of relate on just a humane level, it's just a whole, like an elevated level of like conversation and engagement, and it's less about, the professional title and the title removed. They're human beings at the end of the day, so.
I want to open up to one or two more before we close.
My question's for Christina and Marcus. As a woman and a black man, which are predominantly minorities in the business and professional sports field, how do you handle pushback or rejection that you often feel is based off your sex or race? How do you grow from it or make it something to your advantage?
It's a loaded question.
Yes, it is. I agree. I think the biggest thing for me in my journey, and I can only speak for myself, is being able to prove that I can do this. Being able to live day in and day out by my word, my integrity, my character. I think that those in and of themselves push back on anybody pushing me because I'm a woman in sports. Being able to prove that I can do this, I can do it as well as any man in the press room, in the locker room, or in the boardroom. I think having my character speak for itself and my work ethic speak for itself is the ultimate pushback, but there are times where that's not enough, and you have to be able to be willing to go to battle, figure out what battles are worth fighting and what battles you just have to leave behind and chalk it up to somebody that, just is quite frankly not worthy of your time or your effort to push back. But most of all, it's the character and the work ethic to prove I can do this. It doesn't matter who I am.
I mean, it's a complicated question. So for me, I'm fully aware in a lot of instances that, I'm the only black guy in the room kind of thing, right? There's a level of I still need to come to the table as Marcus the individual and not this pressure of I'm representing everyone. Right, but at the same time, there is that pressure which I almost like frame positively to say, maybe if I do present myself positive and to some degree a positive representation or reflection of this demographic, it opens up other opportunities, right? For people that may or may not be exposed to folks that look like me in this kind of space. But it's a complicated question. You know, a lot of it comes down to like educating folks, right? That it may just be ignorance in decisions that they make, and rather than being offended by it, it's more, okay, let me make an intentional effort to like educate that person, and hopefully it changes their perspective. It's complicated because it's not all, you don't always see it. It's not always obvious. I don't always know, hey, if a job opened up and someone else gets the job, was I overlooked or was I just not ready for it, right? And that's something you kind of battle with, but I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it, because then I don't want to play that card like, oh, I didn't get it because of my race. Like, that wouldn't be fair to that person for me to accuse them of that, because I frankly don't know. I can ask, hey, what do you need to see from me in order to feel confident that I'd be ready for that, right? So it's complicated, but you know, that's my thought on it.
First, I wanted to say thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come speak to us. But my question is for Ms. Hunley. I wanted to ask what you studied in college and how you got started in the field of athletic compliance.
Sure. Well, as I said, I went to Arizona State University. I was in the Cronkite School of Journalism. I studied on the public relations side. Back then, ASU did not have a sports business school. That's relatively new in the industry. So I made my own path wanting to go into professional sports in public relations. So I studied public relations at ASU, and I started working at the athletic department at ASU. And really every class I took, every news beat I did, I begged my professors to let me take the sports beat, because again, it didn't exist. They didn't have the robust school like you guys do here, or like they do there now. So really, I had that sole focus of wanting to get into professional sports in PR. So that's kind of where I got my start and how I made my way when there was no sports business school, and went from there. Oh, I'm sorry, compliance, sorry. And getting into compliance, it comes with being an athletic director at my level. So keeping students eligible, helping them figure out how their eligibility works. It was kind of the pathway of a long career, how I ended up in the compliance department specifically.
Thank you. My name is Shelby Link, and thank you guys for coming here. As you guys mentioned, the sports industry is constantly moving and changing, and things constantly come in the way. What is your guys' best advice to balance a work and a life, like the work-life balance? Because it's constantly moving, constantly changing. How do you know when to set that aside and enjoy life and be who you are type thing? Thank you.
Well, I think each person has to come to some conclusions for themselves, about themselves. If you go into this industry, which is forever changing, you know, you need to keep tabs on what's happening and try to analyze through relationships where some opportunities may present themselves. You know, everyone should want to have a balanced life. And so there is a problem, I believe, where people, you know, I can talk about the divorce rate. You know, many years ago, that was a foreign word. Didn't exist very much in families. When we became a mobile society and people started moving west, hypothetically, and both the husband and wife were working and the kids were alone, all of a sudden the divorce rate just kept going up. Now we're like 60%. Well, I'm about to celebrate my 62nd anniversary, personally. And so, you know, it's about as best you can. It's always a struggle when you talk about a balanced life. What comes first? You know, I know some young people would say, because people marry later now than they did back then. I was married at 21. So today you hear from young people, well, I'm going to wait till I'm settled and have a good job. And, you know, all of a sudden they're 35 and close to 40. That's kind of late to get started, I think. Part of the joy is having your kids grow up with you. That's what we did. We enjoyed that ride. So as best you can, you kind of balance work, play, family, all of those things. And it's challenging. Nobody has the exact answer there. It's a tough one. But again, go into it with open eyes. Be happy, be excited about all of it.
Okay, so what we're going to do really quick is we want to take a group picture. So listen up. We can do this. Okay, we can do this. Trust me. You'll all be happy. So do you want them to all come up? Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, if you're sitting here, don't move. If you're sitting in the back, if you guys can come up, we're going to have everyone come as close in this area and look up at our beautiful photographer.